Right then, let's have a look at national governing bodies in this video. So this is the last topic that we cover for the exam. It's quite a big one and it's quite complicated. So generally students do struggle to get their heads around this. Let's try and whiz this through as quickly as we can and make sure that we don't cover or miss anything. Right, national governing bodies. These are organisations which have the responsibility of organising a sport, and that covers all the things that that sport is required to have in place in order to run successfully. So it is wide ranging in its responsibilities and in terms of the teams and the competitions that it affects. Obviously, bigger sports will have more established national governing bodies. So sports like football and the FA are well known, but any sport which is established in this country will have to have a national governing body, or NGB. So let's talk about their aims first of all, what they're responsible for. You need to know these, that you could have a question about these in particular. So first of all, they have to establish the rules and regulations of that sport. So they have to codify the sport and make it clear what rules and regulations apply so that the games can all be played fairly. They would also be responsible for changing rules. So any changes to the rules in between seasons would be part of the national governing body's job. Next, it obviously has to maintain participation levels, otherwise it will go out of business. So it needs to have initiatives and programs that encourage young people to take part in sport, in that sport, and encourage participations at all ranges of the participation pyramid. If you remember in lessons, we talked about the bottom of the pyramid being grassroots, local, pay-to-play sport, and at the top could be international, pay-to-play professional sport. They will also be involved in talent identification, and that is particularly important where you have smaller sports and they have specific skills that they're looking for, specific body types they're looking for. So in the lessons we talked about rowing, having tall and mighty talent ID sessions where people who are of a suitable size will turn up and be identified at whether they could be suitable for that sport. Other talent identification could be the use of scouts to identify good players who are then progressed through the ranks to hopefully become a representative of that sport at a top level. Really important, the next one, organising competitions. And these competitions need to be wide ranging. So again, if we talk about the FA, you could talk about the FA Cup, which is open to all professional clubs and some amateur clubs as well. But you will also have local leagues like Saturday and Sunday leagues that young children play in or adults play in at a recreational level. These are all organised primarily by the national governing body. They're also responsible for coaching awards and making sure that coaches are safe to deliver coaching sessions. And obviously this, we'll talk about later, involves having policies like safeguarding policies in place. But obviously the better the quality of the coaches, the higher standard of the coaching, the better the player. They will also be responsible for the selection and the performance of representative teams. So that could be the men's first team, the women's first team, could be disability teams, could be age group teams, but they'll be looking for representative teams who are going to perform at the top level, and also liaising with this big organisation called Sport England. And a lot of their responsibility is about giving funding and grants away. So national governing bodies will liaise with Sport England in order to get grants. So let's talk about this next, funding. Already mentioned that Sport England is one avenue for them to get money or funding. You might also get funding from the National Lottery, which we talked about in lessons as being a really big pot of money that can be available for national governing bodies to use. They could also apply for government grants, which is sums of money which are handed to them in order to do things like improve the number of clubs or teams or improve the facilities. Membership fees are also a way of getting funding, especially at the lower level. Advertising, sponsorship, ticket prices and commercialization, particularly at the top level, sponsorship deals with kit manufacturers and so on, are good ways of getting funding in. So you need to be able to talk about at least 3 or 4 of these methods of gaining funding and know what they are. Then let's talk about policies. This is really important, but students tend to get this mixed up. So they will have lots of policies and rules around how the sport should be played. So some examples of policies, let's deal with this bottom one, safeguarding. We did this in the lesson, it's really important. It's about keeping people safe. And so all clubs need to follow that safeguarding policy and make sure that coaches are well trained and that they've all had the correct DBS checks so that they are clear to be able to work with children. They will also enforce things like anti-doping policies, which means that they will link with WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, or the UK Anti-Doping Agency, in order to test their athletes or players. And then you've also got links in with fair play and initiatives like the Respect campaign. They will also offer support for clubs. So they might give them technical advice about changes in equipment or improving playing surfaces. And then a good example is transition of football clubs to using AstroTurf pitches. And then we'll also talk about the infrastructure of the sport. And this is a lot to do with types of competitions. So I've already mentioned previously, competitions are really important, and you need to make sure you have competitions that cover all age groups, all disabilities, all genders, and all ability levels. Okay. We've also talked about the infrastructure in terms of the rules, but also sanctions and disciplinary procedures. So what happens if a player is sent off, for example? What happens if a club doesn't follow the rules in terms of signing on players? So these are all ways of enforcing fines, which is obviously another way of getting funding. Let's talk about development. So development of the sport, and this is with 3 things in mind. So the players, and that might be developing elite training opportunities and identifying talent, which we talked about over here. But it also might mean about identifying talent for coaches and for officials, and providing a pathway for officials and coaches to be able to progress up through the across the ladder. So from just as they're starting out and refereeing and coaching at a low level, and being able to progress up so that they can potentially move into the professional ranks. So developing a sport, you need to remember, is about players, coaches, and officials. And finally, promotion. So there are 3 aspects to promotion, which we talked about again in lessons. There is promoting participation, and this could be through advertising and making sure that participation is equality. There's equality for all groups of people. Improving the popularity of the sport, and one example could be in encouraging schools to deliver the sporting part of the curriculum. And then media, and we all are obviously aware of the strength of the media and how that can benefit publicising events and making people aware of the sports and the competitions that are taking place. Okay, so that's national governing bodies. It is a common long answer question, so it's really worth spending some time going over this. It's a difficult topic to understand, so make sure you read it through and you can learn what each of these areas is. Here's a question to help you, or a series of questions, because it's such a broad topic area. So have a go at these 3 questions, pause the video, and then mark your answers. As we always, make sure you make note of any other answers you could have achieved a mark from, apart from the ones that you chose to use. Okay, thank you very much.